And we're live. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm very fortunate to be joined by John Carlson, from the CEO of Mark Taylor. Obviously, Mark Taylor is an exciting company to talk with, particularly when you consider the conversation around innovation and where things are at in multifamily these days. John is speaking at Impartmentalize. If you're heading there, perfecting relationships with owners. He's the host of the Multifamily Forward podcast. Incidentally, I love the show you guys did with Shiv on AI and multifamily. That was very, very interesting. Yeah. There's lots to kind of riff on in terms of AI and what's possible. And then also, I think what's ultimately also interesting to share is an electrical engineer, computer programmer from education and moving into real estate. So that has a ton. All of a sudden, when I saw that, something clicked in terms of the conversation that you had. If you had a chance to go to Retcon and listen to Mark speak on the panel there, you heard the conviction around AI and what's the potential in multifamily, and ultimately your positioning around it within Mark Taylor. All of this is interesting from a getting to hell yes perspective. For everyone listening, obviously the conversation is always around getting to hell yes, meeting buyers where the problems exist. And one of the things that's exciting about the conversation, we chatted about this earlier in the pre-call, was talking about like getting to hell yes is recognizing there's a problem to be solved and then positioning yourself to solve that problem. And what's interesting about this podcast is that conventionally we've had a lot of people who are out there in the tech space and the service space selling. We haven't done a ton of conversation on internal selling. And I hope we have some room in the conversation today around that, because I think that one of the things that what I'm observing is that there's a gap between the site level and then the corporate level, and then what has to happen to create space for innovation to occur, and what that feels like from a selling perspective, because it isn't just about shiny spoons, it's about solving problems. And so getting to hell yes, the whole program that we're talking about is about solving problems and making sure we're there to be aware as an alternative when a problem needs to be solved. So that's kind of what the framework for today. John, excited to having you on there. Enjoy everything that you're doing for multifamily, and especially what you're giving forward in terms of content and education. And but again, like we always start the show, a bit about yourself, how you got into multifamily, and we can kind of, that'll spread out in the conversation. And ultimately, be great to hear about the problem that Mark Taylor solves, and specifically how you're different about the solutions that are out there today.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me. Great to be here, Guillermo. I think if I look back, I'll shorten this and be pithy so we can get to the meat of the conversation. But I grew up in southern Minnesota on a farm. Realized farming wasn't for me long term. I was really a full-time farmer outside of school and friends from age 10 until 18. My stepfather was a serial workaholic and entrepreneur, so I learned some positive traits from him. And my mother, of course. And when I think about my engineering days, I went to school for electrical engineering, and during my school time frame, I started working for a small semiconductor company called VTech. They helped pay for some school. I was working full time. And I think the best thing about that period of my life, and I tell this to a lot of, I'll say young folks asking me, hey, what should I do when I grow up kind of thing. And right. I always start with, don't do what you are certain about that you don't want to do. Meaning I knew I didn't want to be a farmer. At the time, I didn't know that I didn't want to be an electrical engineer. However, my world travel at the time through VTech in the lens of that really pushed me to move out of Minnesota. I love Minnesota, but I realized that there was a lot of places I wanted to try out, test out, and potentially live, one being Phoenix. So I moved to Phoenix in early 2001, and I really felt like this could be a home, but I had to find my traction here. At the time, .com bubble happened, 9/11 happened. So really the engineering world from a job career perspective was limited, and I had very little experience. So I was consistently sending out my resume from my apartment community and got to know the staff really well. Well, it just so happened that the community I was living in, my first community in Phoenix, Arizona, fresh out of Minnesota, was a Mark Taylor community called San Cervantes, which we still manage today. Beautiful community. And I think the connections I made within the leasing office when I was sending out, faxes at the time, fax resumes, it really encouraged me to think about real estate. And when I was approached by Michelle Sinclair, the manager at the time, still friends with today, she said, hey, would you consider part-time leasing? I said, no way, in a true fixed mindset, pounding my chest. I'm an engineer. Look at me. No humility at the time. I was 24. And a week later, I came to my senses, said, you know what? I got to pay bills, talk to my family, my girlfriend, Megan, at the time. And I said, yes. And about 6 months later, I got a call back from one of the engineering firms in Chandler. And they said, hey, we have your resume on file. Would you consider an interview? And I thought about it for maybe a millisecond. And I said, you know what? No, I'm going to put pause on that career. I love some things about it. I dislike some things about it. But the Mark Taylor connection, the real estate, all felt right. So I followed that, fork in the road. Life's about that. I went towards the real estate path, and 20 plus years later, here I am. And, I really give a lot of gratitude towards Mark Taylor and the environment, the relationships, the connections that allowed me to create roots here in Arizona. My girlfriend left about a year and a half later after moving, and I was the trailblazer. I was here by myself. So Mark Taylor helped me build that foundation, the root system to be in Arizona long-term. And here I am today.
Outstanding. And then when you take a look at I think there's just such a collision conversation around like the engineering background, the Midwest background. Now you're in the booming West. You're in a sales role, which you may not have been super comfortable with at the very beginning. And how did that transition feel?
I think it was a bit natural for me because I loved to connect with people. I'm an earth sign Capricorn. I like to connect. I loved where I lived. So that wasn't strategy. That was dumb luck. I just found, San Cervantes in the old apartment guide book that was this thick, and the gatefolds, and it looked beautiful. Sand Beach pool, Ramadas. It was breathtaking. And I just feel like the support I received from a mentorship perspective, folks around me, real sharp real estate folks. And then I think as we translated into when I moved into asset management in 2004, I really feel like the third party environment, meaning us working as a third party manager, we also owned and managed our own stuff, but getting all of this influence from great, I'll say, mentors from large institutional clients, mom and pops, so UBS to JP Morgan, you name them. I was exposed to a lot of really smart, gifted, intelligent, experienced real estate folks. And I grasped onto that, man. I'm a lifelong learner. So I was trying to absorb as much as I could from a real estate perspective. And I think at that time, really just put my entire self into real estate and Mark Taylor and multifamily. And it feels good today. Like I feel like I've learned a lot, but there's so much more to go, especially post-COVID and how much things have changed. So that was kind of the start.
It's almost impossible to be in the business right now and not be embracing learning. I mean, I like your language around fixed mindset, and that there are a lot of people out there that have a naturally fixed mindset, and they've got to be feeling very uncomfortable right now because everything that once was true is no longer true.
No, that's right. And I think about, I follow Jordan Peterson closely.
Yep.
I'm an avid, podcaster, reader, all those things. But, he talks about, and this is me when I was younger, I used to care a lot about winning. And he'll say that, true winning is about growing, right? So if you're never a learner, it's about growth and putting yourself in uncomfortable positions and challenging yourself, challenging the status quo, and really pushing yourself to grow and just aim high, right? Be better than yesterday, which is one of our founding principles. You can see it up here on the wall if I point it correctly, which is my favorite principle. And I just think if you push yourself to grow and you elevate yourself even a little bit every day, it's amazing when you look back longer term. I'm not saying I was a bad person or not knowledgeable in 2015 or 10, but man, I've come a long way, and I can't wait for the next chapter because I'm pushing myself to grow as fast as ever.
It's interesting, the growth reality. Like I had a chance to listen to the national men's soccer team coach prior to the Qatar World Cup. He had a chance to chat with a bunch of folks, and he talked about growth and discomfort. And, there's a lot of people right now that might be feeling discomfort. And, he drew out kind of like the cascading J curves, right? So everyone's following, I'm doing J curves. And what he was saying is that when you are, the external circumstances bump you out of your equilibrium, you get discomfort. And that discomfort is the world telling you that it's time to grow. And so for those that are stuck in a period of discomfort, it's actually the time to grow. And those, for as many times as I've read imposter syndrome and felt it myself, I've realized that imposter syndrome is actually the discomfort that comes from growing. And that there's that kind of that gap between a conviction around that you can do it, or that you can do it, or you've done it. And that gap closure is your period up that growth curve and trending above your equilibrium line of what you're comfortable at, and where you start getting increasing returns. And as a leader, these things are hard to get people to buy into, as a seller as well, because in sales, any way you slice it, you're offering change out of people's existing equilibrium. And so when we talk about getting to hell yes, it's trying to find those that are seeking to exit their existing stages of equilibrium. Mm-hmm. They're looking for change. They're looking to solve the problem. They're actively typing into Google something, right? And so, like, I think what's interesting about the conversation, I hope to have the conversation today around, like, it's one thing to talk about it from a sales perspective, external to external. But in your career, like 23 years at Mark Taylor, you will have had to position yourself, your ideas, your any which way you put it, as a solution to an existing problem. Like, in your experience, for those people, especially going on right now, heading into NAA next week, like, how did you capitalize on the opportunities before you? I'm willing to bet that you just didn't answer every job position posting that was put forward before you, that the opportunities were created and maybe uneven articulated before you took advantage of them. How did you navigate that thread?
I mean, I think from an opportunity perspective, it's about looking at your environment, the potential of your organization, the people around you, and really discovering, through yourself, like what can I accomplish? What can I push through? And I think the slight change I'd make to your statement about imposter syndrome, I think that's the first step before you actually even become uncomfortable, because you recognize you're at a ceiling. And then the uncomfortable part is when you step into it, right? You say, I'm going to choose to push through this. Yeah. And I'm going to put myself in that uncomfortable position. And then it's growth time. So I think back to, the old phrase, fake it till you make it. It's probably overplayed, but when I became an asset manager in 2004, I was still relatively young, and I had a lot of employees that were much older than me and much more experienced. So talk about uncomfortable. I remember going to Courtney Village and working with two senior, Todd and Diane, service manager, and combined, they probably had more experience than I had in terms of just total age. And I really said to myself, how am I going to bring them any value? So I put a lot of pressure on myself to really focus in on, I have to really be a student of the market, both in terms of, not only the market, right, the multifamily market, but understanding what drives these folks, what can I bring to the table for them that creates benefit. And I think that ties into what we're talking about today, the buyer seller. I think the startup companies, the groups that don't quite make it in multifamily, they never really get that you have to get buy-in at the site level. No matter about, you can talk about centralization, traditional operations, all of those things, but if you're going to solve a problem, that's one thing, but you have to get buy-in from those teams. And that creates that support mechanism. Because there's going to be some growing pains with installation, with implementation, whatever it is, product, software, SaaS, service related. It's going to be difficult the first 12 months, right? And eventually it just becomes the norm. But to get that buy-in, you really have to understand from those stakeholders what's needed. And I think I've been a really good listener over the years. And as also Jordan Peterson would say in his 12 rules of life, never underestimate the person sitting across from you and what you can learn from them. All I mean by that is, even today when I sit with our new hire team, our new employees every Monday in onboarding. So first day, I'm in there from 12 to 12:45. And it's amazing what I can learn from folks. It might be a 19-year-old that's just starting his career, and he teaches me something. And if you're not willing to be available in those moments to learn, you're going to cap yourself to a certain level. You don't have to have a certain degree or a certain experience or a certain title for me to listen to you. But I think there's so many ways for you to grow when you do those things, right? So just being an ever learner, don't put the wall up just because of what you think that person might know or not know. It's remarkable what you can learn. I learned a ton of things from my 14-year-old daughter, right? It's just, you can't underestimate that aspect.
But think about that that imprint on the culture of Mark Taylor. Like I think that you guys are, well, what I keep hearing over and over again, and I've got my own opinion, and then you go reaffirm it at Recon in terms of what you guys are thinking about. There is a measurable difference between your guys' approach to innovation and how things are changed, rather than, let's say, the other alternatives that are out there. And just what you described, in acknowledging that there's a opportunity to learn from anybody, shows vulnerability, makes it safe to present good ideas. You're seeking, on day one, someone understands that that everybody has an opinion that is valuable, right? And so that creates an opportunity to actually present ideas. And so I'll say, how do ideas come up, Mark Taylor? How are they bubbled through?
Well, one of our 5 founding principles is being transparent. So I think people oftentimes misconstrue the definition of transparency with, oh, you're just going to say everything. Being transparent is a lot about being vulnerable, and you can tie yourself to Brené Brown. She talks about this. You have to be a vulnerable leadership culture type team, like, meaning you have to think about, okay, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. Those are just, in my opinion, experiences if you choose to learn from them. Yep. But, being vulnerable means that you're willing to not only admit that you don't know everything, but also that you're vulnerable to the fact that others around you might have better ideas. It doesn't matter where it comes from. I mean, honestly, our leadership team, there's a lot of humility. And I think that matters a lot. I mean, I think folks that struggle with ego or have leaders above them that, they don't check their ego, because everyone has an ego. But when you activate humility, in my opinion, it just means you're willing to be aware of yourself, your surroundings, and having that engagement, meaning having a humility type lens, really garners yourself to grow and support others around you. So I think, back to the transparency piece, we talk about 360 loops. Like, we do a lot of surveys. We probably survey our company to death. We do a large annual survey of every employee, and we get a real high percentage. Like, if you look at market, we're 35% above the traditional market. People want to tell us what they think. And I think in those moments every year, I pay a lot of attention to it. What are we missing? Like, if there's a lot of things that you weren't aware of, that's a problem as a leadership team. Now, I'm not just saying me, but if you already know a lot of the things they're talking about, that means you're probably moving in the right direction as an organization. There's always something to work on. There's always something to get better at. So I think allowing your teams to be empowered is the big piece. So vulnerability, empowerment, and transparency, they always kind of feed together. And someone from accounting will pop in my office and just say, hey, I have an open door policy is, I hate that term, but you can come talk to me anytime. What do you need? And if they come in with an idea, okay, well, vet it. Like, what does that mean? How does it impact your team, our organization, the company? Does it make sense with our 2030 plan? All of these things, but it doesn't matter where it comes from. And if you have more people thinking that way, that means they're taking accountability or extreme ownership, which is another principle. And that means they're probably bought in, right? Because it always comes back to purpose. So I sit in that room. We had 28 new hires on Monday. And I just said, if you can, we put them through an exercise. We say, okay, if you don't have a personal mission statement, and a lot of, folks at the entry levels, they don't have one just yet. Yeah. We exercise that. They spend 15 to 20 minutes on starting their personal mission statement. Now, it's going to take, as we know, 60 to 90 days to probably do a final draft. But once they're done and they're getting some influence from their Mark Taylor life as their first 60 to 90 days in their career, at the end of the day, does their mission statement connect with ours, which is to create exceptional communities that invite, inspire, and feel like home? If they can see themselves if those mission statements can pair each other, if they can support each other, I think that person will be here a long time and be successful. And when they have purpose, as you know, that means they're pulling the organization forward. And when you have a bunch of people pulling it forward and not necessarily resisting because they're misguided or they don't have the right understanding, you have to know where you're going and why to be successful, in my opinion. So if they know where they're going and why, they have purpose, there's connection. It's the Hubert Jallet from Best Buy, the old CEO, like human magic. That creates human magic, and then the flywheel effect. And then everyone's excited to push through this next phase of whatever it is. because you're always building, you're always growing. So all of those things combined, I think that gives you momentum as an organization, and that's tied back to transparency as a core principle.
We'll talk, like, even linking back to your original experience as an asset manager, right? Like, you sought to understand and listen. So what I keep hearing over and over again is a culture of listening and understanding and empathy, right? Again, another Brené Brown concept, but like thinking about like what you described of your characteristic of how you pursued your career throughout Mark Taylor as an asset manager with senior people all around you. You went and sought to understand what's their objectives, what are their goals, what are they seeking to achieve, and then you went and matched your whatever your solution you're providing, what you're good at, with what they're seeking to achieve, that's the hell yes thing. And like a lot of people feel like this is the gap in the gain concept, that they feel that they're sitting in the gap where they don't actually understand where they fit, but they just feel that there's something is due to them. And that's happened to sellers too, right? They feel they want to persuade people, tell them to buy because I'm telling you it's a good thing. That doesn't really matter, and in the pursuit of a career, it's similar context. And I think that's one thing that for those listening is that no matter where you are, you're ultimately going to have to position yourself to listen to those that have a vote in your progression. And that could be closing a deal, and that can be moving yourself forward in a career opportunity, and recognizing the objectives of those that have the vote. Because what you talked about also is that the asset manager experience, the principles at Mark Taylor, in addition to how you're opening the door for a conversation with accounting or even a new hire, like that cultural around listening and attunement is not common, right? People even in that room might feel a little bit intimidated by having the CEO in there who's had a rock star career and been able and seeking information or input from them. Like that's a commitment to attunement that I don't necessarily feel is very common. And again, as I said, to like open the conversation around an innovative organization, like if you don't have that attunement or the willingness to listen or present yourself vulnerable, even acknowledge the problems that exist, it's impossible to innovate because you don't prioritize accordingly.
Right. Yeah, because if there's not a transparent loop, you're probably, as a leadership team, you're probably designing systems, programs, buying things that you think are necessary for the organization. Now, you might have a really good pulse on your company, your organization, your market space, but if you don't have transparency, a feedback loop, and a true understanding of what the real problems are and how to solve them from your stakeholders, in this case, my employees, that's an issue, because you're gonna miss. You might not miss by 100%, but you might miss 50 or 40%, and then when you're implementing, that's where it bogs down, right? Because now the stakeholders that you didn't bring along, you didn't get their ideas, you didn't give them support, you didn't give them empowerment. Now you're saying, hey, Bill, go figure this out. I know what's right. Just go do it, right? Yeah. And I think that's where you get the most resistance. Then it comes into a situation where you see this all the time, where there's just mass resistance. They'll find everything wrong with whatever it is, and the deliverables almost short circuit, like, oh my God, we can't get this rolled out. No one's buying in. And I see that with large vendors that I talk to often, like, hey, we rolled this product out with this company and it's a disaster, but it works for the other 9 that they rolled it out to this year. It's because that company, that organization probably doesn't create that transparent empowerment loop. And all I know is when you're in advance of rolling something out, you should have a clear understanding of what that stakeholder or that person, that team, that property, or that team needs. That's important. But you have to, in those times of rollouts, and almost always, you have to show appreciation, right? Because people will give you more when they feel a sense of purpose and appreciation. Yep. And if you're just pushing it top down, it's destined to fail. It's a hell no if you do it that way.
Yeah, there's a hell no. I felt that. I implemented software for 25 years. I know the hell no. When you it sounds a lot like what you're talking about is like servitude. Do you ever consider that as a foundation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's one of our characteristics. We have 10 or 11 characteristics, and being servant leaders is one of them. And think when you look across the table at your teams, whatever they are, we have 873 employees today. I think of them as I'm working for them and supporting them along with our clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that's through appreciation and gratitude. So if you're showing appreciation and gratitude for everything they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those folks, our team members, our individual employees give a lot every day. And I think without that supreme dedication, there would be no Mark Taylor, because it's
Mm-hmm.
centered around that ethos is our culture. And, if you have a fractured culture or discombobulated culture,
Franken culture.
It's very difficult to build and move the needle. The light just shut off.
Yeah.
So all of those things being said, I think it's really important that, that those things are in tune, to get the flywheel effect. If not, you're not going to get to the yes, the hell yes. At best you're at maybe, but it's probably a hell no.
So how do you guys commercialize that culture piece? Because it to me, it sounds exceptionally different from the alternatives out there. Are you able to convey that? Or is there data that you have in terms of retention, turnover, resident retention that conveys the way that a Mark Taylor building is run versus ABC?
Well, I think as always, it's the Jeff Bezos. You really have to stay in day one. All I mean by that is you have to be in startup mode always. So we're 40 years this year in business, founded in 1985 by Jeff Mark Scott Taylor. 40 years in business, but as I communicate on a daily, almost weekly basis, probably in that range, we are a startup. So think day one, fail fast, learn, create a lot of experiments, push yourself to grow. Don't get on the high horse like, oh, we've made it, right? Compare yourself to yesterday. Don't compare yourself to others. Comparison's the thief of joy. Really focus on how do we get better and focus on what we believe are the things that we're trying to accomplish. So we have 3 strategic initiatives within Mark Taylor: people, excellence, and growth. And I can tell you, when you push the envelope on supporting people, that's about creating a 5-star employee experience. When you do that and you focus on it on a daily basis, I believe that the other things happen naturally or organically. So you get the excellence, you get the growth. And that's, again, the Hubert Jolly from Best Buy. Focus on people, create the human magic, and all those things fall into place. When you do that at a 5-star level, it means, to me, it translates into what? It means you're going to create a 5-star client experience and a 5-star customer experience, meaning your residents. Because imagine if you have a disgruntled, negative attitude, woe is me, victim, no one's supported, there's no transparency employee base that's thinking that they're in a 2-star environment. Are they going to provide a 5-star environment for a customer if they're feeling 2? No, they're quick to say, I've toured these deals. A leasing consultant or a manager or a service tech I grab on, he's like, oh, don't move in here, man, we're terrible. And they convey, and they'll blame, right? 3 fingers pointing at you, one, it's it's a never ending cycle. It's vicious, actually. So, to get to the 5-star, you really have to start with your people and your employees. And I just believe that that's when you get the support from clients. And when you talk about trust on the buy side, so if I'm trying to get a client to do something, and it's our we're 80% third party. So I go to a client, it's his building, right? We're the manager.
Yep.
And hey, we want you to try something new. I'll go back to 2007. We were the first management company in the West Coast to launch Valley Living. It was Valley Waste at the time. Nice. And Dave Magriso and Scott Stamilio came to me and they said, hey, we really want to expand to the West Coast. They started in Florida. And I had to go to my owners, our owners included, and say, hey, I really think this is a opportunity to provide a great service for our customers and make some other income for our clients. Win-win. And I had to convince these folks, well, I know that if I didn't have a baseline of solid trust in terms of earning that with them, they'd say, no, we're just going to get, 20 more bucks in rent. Well, that wasn't the case, right? This is a service. So helping them understand it, right? Being very clear with, hey, here's the objectives. This is what I believe to be true, but take a chance on me, take a chance on Mark Taylor. We think this is the right thing to do. And without that trust and their willingness to, see you as an advisor to their investment, it's very difficult, again, to get to the hell yes.
You talk about the advisor to the investment piece. Like in that example, there's kind of 2 stages of selling, right? Where the value living folks had achieved your conviction around the change, and then you go test drive it with the customers, and you're out there talking to them, to your owners, was Valley Living included in those conversations with the owners, or is that was you advising independent of the vendor?
At first it was them, but then, eventually you kind of have to take over
Mm-hmm.
and, help move it along. And I think where I really got involved was with our existing employee base at the site levels, because again, if without buy-in and support from them, like understanding, here's why we think it's a good idea. What do you guys think? What's your pushback, right? And just
Mm-hmm.
getting all of the angles, and then testing it out with a few properties and helping them understand, this is why we think this works. And then them saying, hey, no, don't do that. This isn't going to work. Or if you think about our trash problem, will this solve it? Like, so getting everyone that has some skin in the game in a room together, and then creating, okay, here's some challenges we've had with our first rollout, or here's some pathways for success. We can do these things,
Mm-hmm.
or if we tweak this with the Valley Living program, this will help us. So keeping that constant feedback loop in place, I guarantee you that our site teams had more to do with the success of Valley Waste at the time than me. They really helped elevate the product, and today it's pretty standard, 2-3 million units probably across the country. So, getting that stakeholder buy-in, and Dave from Valley Living Now Apartments knows this. You have to get on-site buy-in.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that the like historically I'll say the boom cycle last 6-7 years, like it got a little bit easy to be an advisor?
Well, I think there's ways to think about yourself. You can think about yourself as and this is not a dig, but you could say I'm just a property manager,
Mm-hmm.
meaning property management company, or you can say no, I'm an advisor for this investment,
Mm-hmm.
for this group, whether it's institutional, sponsor driven, individual, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to talk about this next week at NAA. How am I going to show up? Am I going to show up if you just show up as a property manager, like, hey, I'm just going to manage your move-ins and move-outs. I'm going to manage your financial statements, and I'm going to do what you tell me to do as owner. That's one way to do it. If you show up as an advisor really means think about it as a partnership, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm clearly understanding what your investment objectives are before we even get keys to the deal. So we
Yeah.
understand what you're trying to accomplish. Is it a cash on cash return? Is it a value add prop? Are you trying to flip it? Is this a long-term hold? What are your sensitivity mechanisms? And understanding it from their objectives and what their pain points are. That way I can start in the right way, right? We have an ownership onboarding process, and then get into the activity of the real estate. If you're in month, 2, 4, 6, 8, you should be having constant conversations with your clients to help them
Mm-hmm.
understand how it's going, but not just operationally. Like, what's happening in the surrounding market? Is there new retail coming in? What's going on with job growth?
Mm-hmm.
What's the macro conditions or trends within that metro? All of these things start to become advisor conversations. And if you do it right, in my opinion, just one opinion, I feel like you can have a 30-minute phone call with a client. 20 minutes is about all of the things I mentioned other than operations,
Yeah.
because they're trying to get an understanding of their investment, if they made a good decision, and should they buy more assets? Should they acquire more? Should they sell? Should we implement a value add program that we weren't going to do because it's working so successfully across the market? So I think understanding the macro objective, or the macro environment, understanding the investor thesis, what are they trying to accomplish? And then ensuring that everyone knows within that parameter, not just
Yeah.
the manager, but it's the asset management team, it's the marketing team, it's the accounting team. It's all got to fuse together, saying, okay, we all know that these are hot buttons for our client. I mean, my accountant that works for XYZ ownership group and the managing director, they're on the same page. They have to be.
Yeah.
And that creates the fluidity and the motion. And then what happens? Guess what? When they have conversations with their accountant, maybe it's just once a month, with the managing director, with their marketing account manager, everyone's on the same page. And it feels like, hey, these guys get it. It doesn't matter if they're in the same office, same building, even the same city, but are they on the same page with my investment thesis? It does what? It creates the flywheel trust effect. Oh, I trust these guys.
Mm-hmm.
They know what's going on, because inevitably you're always going to have a mistake. Something's going to happen, right? You're going
Mm-hmm.
to put a bunch of coins into the trust bin. You're going to take a couple out because, we dropped the ball, or a financial statement was late a day, or whatever it is, right? Things happen. But they're like, okay, I know that's just an anomaly. I know it's not the norm, because I trust these guys. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
why we have such long-term relationships and really never get fired. That's a big piece of it.
like it feels like you're in a competition of one. Like when
Oh,
you
I
the
mean,
way,
man, there's a lot of good operators and folks out there. I just think it's really, you know, creating that why, right? The Simon Sinek why, creating
yeah.
purpose and getting everyone to believe in what you're trying to accomplish. And I think a lot of groups will just be splintered or fractured in terms of what are we trying to accomplish, right? What's our mission?
Mhm.
I don't know. You know, they might say, I have no idea. I'm just going to go put
Yeah.
my head down and do my job. That's the worst thing when you start to hear those conversations. Oh, I just put my head down. I don't participate in those things. You know, leadership, they don't get me. I just feel like that's when you see the turnover mechanisms happen. So if you know it's working, I think you look at the data points are reviews, right? Review and rep.
Mhm.
So 95% of our assets are 4.5 Google stars or above. That's a
Yeah.
big deal because it tells me our customers are being treated correctly. We're historically in the top 5 of best places to work in Arizona. So, you know, these things tell me good things. Our turnover continues to trend down from an employee base, even though it's competitive, because there's career paths here. There's growth opportunities. So, you know, that tells me we're doing things right.
Mhm.
I can name the 100 things we're doing wrong, but I think most people are quick to be good at that, right? Oh, I can
Yeah.
find all the problems, but what's the solution, and how do you rectify that? That's the difficult piece.
Were all those systems in place? Like, has that been something that's been in place for years and years and years, or is that something that's emerged in the last 5, 10? Like, when did all of these systems become the way at Mark Taylor?
What do you mean by systems? So I understand.
Like, in terms of like what you just described, in terms of like setting expectations around talent, setting expectations around transparencies, setting expectations around how you treat one another. Like even and look at the data around your turnover versus like I'm hearing some places site level turnover 90%,
Yeah,
right?
we're
Like
a third of that.
at
Yeah,
90%,
crazy.
like every 6 months, there's a new person at the door. It's absolutely impossible to hit 4.5 stars in that case.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
And so
yeah. Right.
how do you, it didn't, so it's like, I'll give credit, but I'm curious to where it initiated, right? Has this been a Mark Taylor
Well,
thing for 40 years? Or is this something that happened along the way? Was there a moment or an event that Mark Taylor said, you know what, we're going to choose to be different?
I'd say it was really. I mean, kudos to our founders. I think they founded this organization on doing the right thing, which is one of our 5 principles. I think we did a bit of a pivot. So you know, if you've read Charlie Munger, you know Charlie Munger.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's what
you know, he
matters.
talks about, yeah, when you follow the herd, it's just a regression to the mean. So in 2014 and 15, we were looking at our reviews at the time. It wasn't as prevalent as it is today, but we were getting more and more negative reviews, and they were centered around one specific thing. And part of it was because of the brand we created in one market in Phoenix, and
Mhm.
slightly, you know, Las Vegas. We were taking on B and C assets with existing clients. We were like, oh, well, you do a great job for us here. We're going to go buy asset, a B or C asset, manage it. And we felt like we could just put our management, you know, overlay our style, our processes, our procedures, our people over the top, and it would be good. The
Mhm.
problem with that, Guillermo, was that you had residents that lived in a Class A building,
Right.
were had experienced Mark Taylor, and now they go to another Mark Taylor, but it's a C asset. I'm not saying the C assets are bad. I think, you know, we have to have all asset types, of course,
Yeah.
but it was negatively impacting our brand. So
Sure.
we made a decision after several meetings in 2015 to fire ourselves on B and C assets and go Class A only. And I say that was a pivotal moment where we said, okay, we have to do the things that we believe will get us to where we need to go long term. And so that was kind of that first inflection point. And I think, you know, we've really gone against the herd a lot since then. And it's
Mhm.
not easy to do in third party. Again, you have to have the trust to get the third party groups to get on board. Sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness instead of permission, right?
Yeah.
Those are pieces of it. But I'd say that was the start, for sure. And then, you know, really defining our principles, making sure our vision and mission was in place. And then I think what we did really well beginning in 2021, we said, okay, let's take our onboarding process, let's blow it up and start with
Yep.
the why, and really ensure that everyone's getting a clear understanding of what Mark Taylor is, how we show up. And one of my challenges every Monday is I'll ask them to take one of our 5 principles and apply them to their personal life. And I'll get lots of great answers because I'll say, why does your CEO want you to do that? And I'll come back with, those are great answers. And I'll say, if you can start to live your life with these principles, or do all 5, and I'll give all 5. So let's be transparent, be better than yesterday, choose the right attitude, do the right thing, take extreme ownership. If you take all 5 actually in your personal life, guess what happens? Your personal life's better, your relationships are better, your friendships are better. You start to show up for work differently, your career, you're set up for success, right? You have a baseline. The person
there's
that's
intentionality.
there's intentionality. Yes, for growth, really. And
Yeah.
all 5 work together. So if you're a person that's of victimhood, blames everybody else for your failures, never takes accountability, doesn't choose the right attitude, which is just a framework, it's a choice, you're probably not going to show up for work the best way, and you're probably not going to advance your career. So I just challenge them, use one. If you can use all 5, great. And even if they left Mark Taylor a week later, I don't want them to do that. If they use those 5 in their personal life, they're better off. And you know what? If I didn't impact them with anything at Mark Taylor from a career path, because they were where they're only 7 days, they still have those 5 pieces. And if their life's better because of that, awesome.
I guess, the thing that I find, like, that I hope people hear is that while you guys have branded this in the Class A space, this isn't something that is unique to Class A or AA or even Mark Taylor. This is an approach to philosophy. It's a philosophical conversation around approach to life. And I think that what I've, it's choices, right? Like, this is like the 7 habits of seven habits of highly effective people, is this power of choice, right? And so, but acknowledging that everybody has the power of choice. The second you get up in the morning, you can make your bed and not make your bed, right? You can lay in bed and not get out of bed. You can scream, do whatever you want, but like, that power of choice eliminates the result set of being a victimhood or of complaint, because you honor the fact that you are a grown adult and you are accountable for your outcomes. And to do that, I'll give you the power of choice every single minute, every single day, given that you fall between these principles and guidelines. And so that delegation of decision authority around these principles and guidelines allows people the freedom of choice and empowerment. What Daniel Pink talks about, mastery, accountability, and mastery, accountability, and freedom. I think it's freedom, nonetheless. But be able to make those choices on a day-to-day basis, as long as they understand. So there's safety there. But then so many organizations out there, and organizations not just multifamily, organizations wide, there's fear, there's toxicity. There is inconsistency among I remember I worked at a company and it was like, they had a big poster and it was called, let's call the brand ABC. And it was like, we're one ABC. And even the lead in our office would say, well, that poster isn't even ring true. And so right away, you're like, you know what I mean? If it's starting to kind of break down at the poster level, then what else is on the back end of this all? And so then that breaks down the transparency, that breaks down the trust. And then everyone just starts doing their own thing. It's chaos, anarchy. People just start thinking for themselves. And so it completely breeds a culture around narcissism versus servitude.
Right. Yeah, it's also well said. I think if you look at a culture and you say, okay, if you say I'm a brand new leasing consultant, I'm 25 years old, and I go into a Mark Taylor community and there's a team of 10. If all 9 people, or at least 8 of them, are choosing to abide by our principles, it's likely if they're not going to, as a new employee, within 90 days, they're going to know. Like they're going to say, they start complaining to their leasing, like, oh, well, that's not really how we do things, or they show up with a bad attitude. That's just a choice, right? So eventually they stand out. They're the outlier, and that's okay. It just means Mark Taylor's not for that person. I found there's opportunities somewhere else, hopefully, for them, but it's not here. They self-select.
I found that there's a self-selection to it, and like as someone who's had to let people go, I want to believe, and I hope this isn't convincing myself, that I'm acknowledging that this fit isn't going to make them happy any longer, and so I can't make them happy because here's the way that these things work over here. And so if we can't make you happy, then ultimately we're just depreciating each other's assets that we can deliver. And it's not going to work out. And so I take the approach that we're setting people free and giving them liberty to go be best at what they're good at, but it's just not right here. And it's a tough conversation you can live with, but that's how I feel.
I'll add to that the value of the principles from a management perspective. So just, if you're a regional manager on the call, if you think about having specific principles and standards,
Mhm.
even if you're friends with a person, if they're not meeting your standards, it's very explicit. They know, right? So,
Yeah.
when someone comes to work with a bad attitude at Mark Taylor, and it continues to happen, uh, and they have those one-on-ones, like, you can't show up this way anymore. That's from day one.
Mhm.
That choosing the right attitude matters. It's a principle that we will not compromise on from a standards perspective. It allows you, I mean, there's lots of friendships, right? We're in two markets. Lots of people
Mhm.
have friendships, manager to employee. As long as the standards hold true, it's not an issue. If there's no standards, no principles, then it looks like favoritism. I'm not going to fire Billy because I like
Yeah.
Billy, because it's not about standards, it's about the relationship or the friendship. When you go by standards, right, and
Yeah.
merit-based cultures, it creates a different element of support for your leadership, and you just know how to show up, which is a big deal. People want to know how to be successful. They want to know at the end of the day, end of the week, hey, I'm making an impact. I'm coming with purpose. Am I being successful in my endeavors?
Mhm.
If there's a clear understanding of your KPIs, your objectives, how to show up through principles, this is our mission, this is our vision, right? Aspirationally, it makes it much easier for everybody.
So when you guys compete, do you compete like, I think the three kind of pillars of competition, operational excellence, and you got to choose one. You can't choose all three.
Okay.
OpEx, um, pro, innovation, or product. Sorry, OpEx, service, or product. Product is innovation. How do you guys think you compete? Operational, so price, service, or product.
Well, I think some people rely on the product as a crutch. I
Yeah.
think it's less about, I mean, we're in class A, so that there's really great product. You can pick apart certain
But I mean,
deals, of
but I
course,
mean,
but
the Mark Taylor product, like the Ritz-Carlton product, is a system. The McDonald's product is a system. The Four Seasons
mhm,
product is a system. Sorry, I wasn't very clear. A little bit gappy in how I explained it.
that's
The
right.
way I hear from what you're talking about, there's a Mark Taylor way, and
That's right.
is that sufficient enough to be differentiated in the market and ask for a higher price?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to go with a combo of service and operational excellence, because
Mhm.
if you have a set of standard principles, so
Yeah.
everyone functions a certain way, it's behavior, right? So behavior
Mhm.
orientated. And when I talk to vendors, which I often do, I always ask, are we paying you on time, and how are we treating you? And
Mhm.
if they're getting treated the right way, they'll tell me. If they're not, they'll tell me, because, again, transparency. But if you're acting a certain way, behavior, like the majority of your teams, your individuals, are operating the way that we've designed it, that's a checkbox, right? That's great.
Mhm.
And then operationally, if that's the case, now we're applying our behavior with our standards. So we have
Mhm.
pre-opening standards, we have marketing standards, we have property certifications internally. Those things translate from behavior to operational excellence. And then if you support those, in my opinion, with being students of the market, all I mean by that is you have a clear understanding of what's happening in the market and what will happen through a data specific lens. Like, we have lots of boots on the ground, 32,000 units in Phoenix alone. We have a pulse of the market. And I think what happens is you have groups that are laggards, like they don't use data to their advantage. It's almost a weakness. Like, oh, we got a report from XYZ. Let's just pick on Yardi Matrix because everyone knows them.
Yeah.
We got the monthly Yardi Matrix report from February, and now it's March 30th. Well, that's great, but that data is in arrears, right? If you're looking
Mhm.
at live data, we already moved a certain direction philosophically. Like, we might say we're targeting a certain occupancy. We're going to move it up. We're going to move it down. We're going to add concessions, depending on the market cycle. So all of those things, data supported behaviors, standards. I think that gives us an advantage. It's hard
Outstanding.
to do, as you know. Yeah.
Well, no, this is why people often, I mean, like this, the kind of the case studies on picking more than one are usually limited to those that have already accomplished one. Like the Lexus, first Toyota achieved operational excellence, and then Lexus incorporated service, and then Toyota brought back service.
Mhm.
That kind of like that modality of being able to first accomplish one of them and then enhancing that. I'll say maybe catalyzing what you're really good at or known for by operational excellence. I mean, ultimately, everyone has to have a boot with or have a play in operational excellence, but there are those that compete exclusively on price. You know, the Walmart of the world is a great example, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say too, with tremendous gratitude, because we've been around for 40 years in one market, and then Las Vegas in 2010 and beyond. You know, if I walk through the grocery store or, you know, at an event and I'm talking to someone, I mentioned, you know, who I work with, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I lived at a Mark Taylor."
Yeah.
They never say I lived at, almost never. 90% of the time they'll say I lived at a Mark Taylor when I was in college, or yeah, I lived at a Mark Taylor when I was building a house, whatever it is. But they always say Mark Taylor because there's a brand element, a luxury brand element for living, and it's such a gratifying moment when I hear that, because I know that we're doing things right, and that people, no, not everyone loves their experience at Mark Taylor, right? It's not 100%. I'd love to get there. That's kind of the visionary, aspirational, most admired brand. But, you know, if you're doing things right, mostly, that will happen more and more for someone that's trying to create that brand, right? Whatever it is. And I know groups that try to start, you know, oh, I want to build my brand. Well, okay, do you do it with marketing dollars and a cute logo, or do you do it through service or through a different lens? Like, how do you create a brand? Well, it's getting people to trust you, right? So I bet you we win often when someone says, "Oh, I know it's a Mark Taylor, so I'm going to go live there because I know I'm going to be treated fairly. I know the service is going to be, you know, 4.5 or above." I like to say 5-star, but I don't want to overinflate any employees' egos. But, you know, can we get to 5? So, you know, they feel good about that decision because there's a trust factor.
Yeah.
That matters to me.
Yeah. Do you find that, like, so you mentioned how you guys had you'd fired yourselves from certain deals. You know, you probably don't win every deal that you go at. Maybe you do.
Certainly not.
And what kind of objections do you get when you debrief?
I mean, there's certain, you know, there's things that you can't necessarily always solve for. So we're not
That's
a
what I'm
national.
seeking to understand.
Yeah. So we're, you know, there's companies that just want a national brand. So let's pick on Graystar, the grill in the room.
Yeah.
Say, oh yeah, I have, you know, I have 10 deals and they're spread across 7 states. Well, we're going to obviously not be part of that conversation. If they want to centralize their management into one platform or one group. So that happens. We've had those conversations. We've shifted. You know, I can remember certain groups that went national and said, okay, we're going to use them nationally. But what I can tell you is here, every client we have that has deals in Phoenix and or Las Vegas, that have deals in other states, they use us exclusively in Phoenix or Las Vegas, which is great. That tells me a testament to that we do things a little different here. So I think at the core of your question, though, when they say no, that's one piece. I think there's always relationships that are part of that. Like, we liked your pitch, but we're going to go this direction because I've known Rick for a long time. I want to use Rick's team. That happens. Oftentimes there's, you know, there's a conflicting underwriting, right? So we think the market's going to do this, but there's a proposal that's, you know, rents are this much higher or NOIs this much higher. Oftentimes in a non-realistic, we try to do everything realistically, like, because we have to absorb that, right? So if we get the deal, we have to be successful. So if I give you a bullshit budget just to get the deal, now the consequences are I have to deliver based on what I promised, and I can't get there.
And it would go against your value of transparency.
Right. So, and that's okay with me. Like, if you, the owner or developer or group buying the deal, and management XYZ believe that it's here, but we're here, so be it. You know, and if you get there, great. But we're not going to give you some fiction type number that gets you to, you know, I'll just say it'll be a bad breakup, a bad relationship at the end. And then, quite honestly,
you're thinking of the renewal. You're thinking of the renewal at the win.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Always. I'm thinking about the relationship long term. I want this to be, 10, 15, 20 plus years. And I think the biggest piece, this is the most significant, is that, yes, we do pitches, but we win more business through organic relationships, doing things the right way, like our phone ringing. When we have to go pitch against 4 other management companies, that's not really for us. It's like, oh, we're going to get all hands on deck. Let's give me your best foot forward. Tell me the best story. Give me the best marketing story for this. And we're like, okay, this is just what we do. So we're a bit underwhelming from a pitch deck perspective. Here's what we do. Here's our philosophy. We know we're going to manage the real estate really well. We're going to maximize your bottom line. And then we're just not a big dog and pony show. So sometimes that doesn't work to our advantage, but I'm okay with that.
But I could have guessed that from half of the conversation, given that the competition of one feel about how you guys establish yourself. Because like if someone else is writing the rules to win, it's probably not going to work out for you guys. But if it's your rules and that's what they're seeking to solve for, that's the hell yes. Because they're seeking to solve for what you solve. Like they're looking to buy Mark Taylor, not buy something else that competes with that.
Yeah, and you can, if you do the correct probing questions, and you really understand, get to know them as much as you can before you sign a management agreement. But I think about it when we do a SWOT analysis and we're against 4 other companies. A lot of times in this environment, there's a lot more on the threat side, and that pisses people off. Sorry, my leg.
No worries.
Because they want to hear how great their deal is.
Yeah, they want to go.
And like, oh no, tell me, I want this to be a rosy story. I'm like, well, it would be. However, you have 6,000 units within a 3-mile radius of you delivering within the same 4 quarters as yourself. So there's going to be some challenges. So sometimes that's to our advantage, but I think transparency, honesty, being forthright, building trust through the relationship, that has to start right away. It can't be the old sales where you're just sales dumping, and saying yes. I think that just leads to bad outcomes.
Do you when you take a look at the other markets you kind of talked about, I gather that if I've got 4 buildings with Mark Taylor in Phoenix and I find a sweetheart deal in SoCal, I gotta want you to do it. How many of those come across? Like how many of those? But what degree of frequency is your current customer base seeking to pull you to other markets?
All the time. So we have 67 clients, and we have a running list because again we're data orientated. We have just over 24,000 units in other states around the country that we could go manage tomorrow, in my opinion. Meaning we know who they are. They've asked us, right? So hey, come here. But the problem with saying yes to that is that we're not the same company in Utah. We're not the same company in Colorado. Now, could we be? Potentially. But that means I'm going to exhaust a lot of resources and effort and company willpower and culture to go open a market. We tried that once way back in 2010. Granted, it was a difficult time. It's really hard to get your culture, your standards, your kind of your druthers in new markets. It's not impossible, but I see groups adding 10, 15, 25,000 units in a year. I'm like, in 15 different states across the country. You just can't be. I know this business too well. It's difficult to be a really good steward of capital and an operator when you're doing that. It's just hard. Then you're just relying on, hopefully you get a good manager, and then maybe it's okay. But I just feel like that's not the best way for us based on how we operate. I would lose sleep at night knowing that we're exhausting our resources and not focused on the 2 markets that we need to focus on.
Well, you have product market fit.
What's that?
You have product market fit for what you guys deliver.
That's right.
And that's
right.
Like when you start, again, back to the growth curves, if you go outside your product market fit, it has to be treated like a new product. Like it can't be, and that comes with its own risks and perils, et cetera. And so given the size of the market that you're in, there's plenty of market opportunity to exhaust that falls within where you have a low cost of sales, a high rate of renewal, haven't lost a customer yet. You've got the talent base. Like that is a good model. That's a an easy company to run, all due respect, an easier company to run than one that's, we talked to a prospect that had 7,000 doors in 38 states.
Ooh, yeah, that's
single family.
Right.
Right. Definition of insanity.
Yeah. And of course, growth matters. And I just know, and again, it goes back to data. I won't say the percentage, but I know exactly where we stand today in terms of our percentage of Class A, third party managed. And we have a lot of new business here to work through. So, it's not that we're short-sighting ourselves from an opportunistic or growth perspective. It's just really that there's a lot of opportunity here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'm with you. I get it. I totally get it. Well, we're going to need to close this thing out because we promised everyone for an hour, and I appreciate every single minute we've gotten from you. So 2 big questions we always asked is, 3. What's the piece of advice you give yourself 25 years ago, 20 years ago, or those that you're talking to on a Monday morning?
Be an ever learner, aim high, Jordan Peterson, meaning, delayed gratification, push yourself to grow, take accountability, be responsible for yourself today, but think about yourself tomorrow. I never thought I'd be in my 40s when I was, 20, but here I am, right? So plan for that. Follow your principles, your mission statement, whatever that is. I just think it's a great way to live your life. And if you haven't created a personal mission statement, do so. I just think, and it can be a myriad of different directions. It could be just for you personally and your family. It could be just career orientated. It could be a blend of both. So for my Mark Taylor, I'll just share mine. My personal mission statement is to support, empower, and unify our culture so that someday each employee will love Mark Taylor as much as I do. That's a big task because I really love this organization because I'm so grateful for what it's given me. And that's kind of my marching orders, and just be better than yesterday. I mean, if you do that, you're gonna probably be successful, and you got to work, right? You got to work ethic matters. You got to grind, rise and grind, push yourself.
I've got to introduce you to a friend of mine who's in the Scottsdale area, John Carlson. You guys will hit it off like gangbusters.
Love to.
Yeah, I'll set up a connection with you too. He's ex Brookfield and
Brookfield.
Yeah. So you guys are just like, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to be a fly on the wall. It would be exhausting, but it would be fun to be a fly on the wall for a bit.
Good. Well, let's meet up when you're here.
Yeah, definitely. One more thing is, who should we talk to next?
Next person?
Yeah.
On my team?
Who should you invite on the show?
I think it'd be great for you to get Dustin Lacey, our CTO, on, because you can tie in the innovation piece to it. Talk about centralization and kind of what's next for multifamily. That'd be a great resource.
Exciting. Well, we'll connect at NAA next week.
Yes. I'll see you next week. Yeah. We'll be there.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Chelsea and Monica, for the comments throughout. Chelsea, thanks for the introduction to John. That was very appreciated, and I hope everyone had a good chance to listen to the conversation today.
Yeah. Hi, Chelsea.
Again, this will be on the podcast. There'll be a blog coming out later. A bunch of stuff that kind of goes through on LinkedIn. If you're catching this not live through LinkedIn, feel free to add some comments along the way. We will get notified and we'll be able to jump in and answer questions. John, thank you so much for today. Appreciate just the conviction around humility, listening, lifelong learning, all these things, and then the data orientation to back it up. And I've always felt that, lifelong learning, entrepreneurship without a customer with data behind it feels a lot like a hobby, and like commercializing it with data makes things a whole lot more conviction around the decisions you're making. So thank you for all that conversation. And I'd like to get your book list would be, Chelsea, if you're listening still, the book club would be interesting to follow what you're reading, because that would be.
Yeah. Book club, podcasts. Yeah. All of it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate coming on the show today. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Cameron. See you next week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye. All right.